Your smart apartment advisor with the Real Management Company, back with an update on what's going on in the world of property management and real estate based on our perspective here as property managers. There is some interesting news to talk about, and the kinks are being worked out in the process of distributing the federal, state, and local money for COVID relief. So that is really the big thing that I'm going to talk about today. There's also a few small changes coming with regard to some fire safety legislation and some other small things to discuss related to some legislation coming up regarding sprinklers, which may or may not actually take place. So I'll start by sort of giving you the basics. The process of applying for funds, federal and state funds, for COVID relief, the 80%, up to 80% of your rent would be covered in exchange for 20% forgiveness of the past due balance for tenants who are eligible, and I'll get into eligible in a minute. That process is going to start March 15th, and I was on a call yesterday with my friends at the Apartment Association, and they have been asked with short notice and a lot of work to do to get it. They've been asked to apply for status as a community-based organization to distribute the funds, which would mean that there's a queue we can work with in our industry to get access to those funds for eligible tenants. And so we are working on that and hoping to know in the next couple of days whether that application is approved. And we're putting together our spreadsheet with all of our affected tenants, anybody who has an unpaid balance going back to basically a year ago when this all started. And we are going to have to differentiate. The first round of the relief funds is going to go to those tenants who have less than 50% of the area median income. And so in San Francisco, 50% of area median income for a single person household is $44,850. Now, there's also something in here, I think, and this is all still being worked out, and I'm not 100% sure, but there's also something, if a person lost their job and was unemployed, and the pandemic-related deferred rent took place as a result of their being unemployed related to the pandemic, they're automatically included. So they're automatically assumed to be qualified in the first batch, I think. So we're gonna have to find out more about that. But the second round would be for people less than 80% of area median income, which in San Francisco is $71,700 for a single person household. Now there's some loops and some perspective shifts that have to take place in a place like San Francisco, where we have roommate situations. We have some circumstances where we have 2 or 3 people not in the same household, who some are paying the rent and some are deferring. And those would be considered individual households. They don't have to pool their money to determine their income status and their eligibility in this circumstance. And so we'll be reaching out to our tenants in the next week or two to explain all of this to them and let them know that we would like to work with them to obtain this funding so that they don't have to pay any of the past due balance. I anticipate that most people would probably say, sure, I'll be happy to work with you. But we will see whether these individuals are interested in working with us. We'll see whether they are interested in cooperating with the process. I would imagine, most people should be. I have a hard time understanding why anybody would say that they don't want to apply for this funding. But we'll see what people say. We have between $26 and $28 million coming from the federal grant, and another $26 to $28 million coming from the state grant. And so it's going to be interesting hearing what people say. It'll be interesting working along in this process. Some of the money requires that the tenant sign the application to ask for the money. Some of it is just for the landlord to apply for and get approved. And one of the unforeseen or maybe it's foreseen, but something that I see as a potential problem here is the possibility that people might double dip, apply for the same money from the federal government and the state. And it's hard to decide, whether that makes any sense, whether that's a good idea, whether that's a problem. You're not allowed to do it, but also the fact is, if you get turned down, I don't know what circumstance they would turn somebody down. I don't really know what the qualifications are other than meeting the basic criteria. But the fact of the matter is that if you apply for federal money and you didn't apply for state money, and the state money gets exhausted and the federal program turns you down, I don't know what you do in that circumstance. So that's the kind of questions that we're asking and trying to determine as we move forward in the process and figure out what to do. But the idea here is we're going to reach out to the tenants and ask them to self-declare and let us know what their paperwork, what their status is. If you lost your job, if you were unemployed, we'll put you into the first bucket. If you are under 50% AMI, we'll put you in the first bucket. If you are above 50 but below 80% AMI, we'll put you in the second bucket, and we'll see how that comes. But it'll be interesting to see how quickly this gets turned around and how onerous the process is. We don't even have the forms yet. We haven't been able to see what it is. And another issue is that tenants may say they'd rather work with a different organization. So I don't know, I'm not sure what the reasoning would be behind these decisions. And we're the first draft of our email to the tenants asking about this is a very sensitive and understanding thing that tries to explain this. So we'll see what people say. I'm anticipating the vast majority of people will be agreeable. I'm hoping that that's the case. So that's what we're up to on the relief money. We've got the spreadsheet that I had. Bert, I'll get to you in 1 second. The spreadsheet that I had something like 35 tenants who were eligible in our portfolio, and a total of about $250,000 in rent, which, it's that's a lot of money, but it's manageable. And if you figure, you're going to forgive. Actually, here, let me take a look here. I'll give you the exact number. You're going to forgive 50 grand to get 213,000. So there you go. It's only 40 grand of forgiveness to get 160 grand worth of deferred rent. Many of these tenants have actually resumed paying rent and just have past due balances. So we'll see what the criteria looks like. I hope that it's more clear and easy to understand than some of the other forms that I've seen. Bert, what was your question?
Yeah, in all this $1.9 billion, is there anything for units that have sat empty for most of the year?
No, and that's our market risk.
Because I was kind of hoping I would see something when they talk about small businesses, if those could be included in small businesses, because you can actually apply for grants and things there. But apparently that doesn't include landlords.
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. And the fact of the matter is that that's our market risk. That is, what we deal with in our business. We're not guaranteed to have tenants. We're not guaranteed to have tenants who can pay the rent. We're not guaranteed to, have the same rents that we've had for a long time. And, everybody gets to make their own decision about how they feel about the rents in their building. And,
except the businesses are getting money,
but that's because they were required to close. You weren't required to take your units off the market for the pandemic. If that were the case, you might be eligible, right? If it was for public safety, you had to stop renting vacant units. Now, we did that for a short period of time in the beginning, but the fact of the matter is that that they would say you could have found a willing tenant at a lower price, and you could have mitigated your losses. But we believe in the value of San Francisco real estate, most of us do, and we are frankly daunted by the one-way gate of rent control, that if you lower the price too far, you may never get it back. And so we value the long-term, value of the property over the short-term rental, hit that we take in the middle of a very, very odd, very unusual situation. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And some of my clients are racing to the bottom and playing the pricing, the price war game on their apartments, and they get their units rented. But a 30% hit on your rent is going to be hard to get back, especially if rent laws continue to tighten down over the next 5 to 10 years. So we'll see what what that turns out to be. But that's where we're at with the stimulus and the money that's available. Once again, I think, as I said the last time we spoke, it's good to see that the money came through with an 80-20 split, as opposed to what I was expecting at the very beginning when they started talking about this, the first few months of the pandemic, that we'd propose an 80-20 split and it would get cut down to a 50-50 split, which is pretty outrageous. But the untold pain that we've all felt in this pandemic has been not the people who have the deferred balances, but the people who rightly chose not to defer their balance and went to go live somewhere where they didn't have to pay as much or any rent, go live with family or go to a cheaper place. And now, we have vacancies, and the costs of doing business here are much higher. So, it's a challenge. So unless we have other questions in that regard, I'll move on. There's a fire safety legislation that has been scheduled to go to be effective. All buildings with fire alarms were required to have what is it, I think 75 decibel fire alarms at the pillow. They call it the pillow test legislation, requiring that the fire alarms are loud enough to be 75 decibels in each bedroom inside the apartments. This would and has required many of our buildings to upgrade their fire alarm systems by adding, for example, horn strobe sirens inside each unit, especially in a place where you have a central hallway and big apartments. That requirement has been onerous and difficult and expensive to implement. And I think the due date for that was next July. It may have been this July, I can't recall, but the current requirement is now being extended by 2 years. There was also a part of that requirement that required, made it so that anytime you pulled a permit for $50,000 worth of work in your building or more, which, let's face it, nowadays that's a full gut and remodel of a one-bedroom apartment. So if you're going to pull that permit, you have to immediately comply. Before you get that permit, you have to also get a permit to bring your fire alarm system up to these requirements. I am told that that's also going to be removed so that we're able to get permits, because once again, you have things like mandatory seismic retrofits where people are pulling their permit and then they get this extra gotcha requirement on top of that requires them to spend another $15,000, $20,000 or $30,000 or more upgrading their alarm system while they're trying to do this, a major seismic retrofit. So bringing all of those things together at the same time is sometimes problematic, and it looks like perhaps we're going to get some relief in that regard. We've had a couple of issues with older high-rise buildings that have had fires. There was a big fire that took out a number of units at the Gateway down near the Embarcadero. I was down there, was it the week after Christmas, and noticed the big burned out blackened section of the building, 6 or 8 stories up. Was pretty dramatic to see. And Aaron Peskin and his team down at the Board of Supervisors are restarting a conversation about requiring sprinklers to be installed in larger high-rise apartment buildings, which, everybody, the knowledge is that these are not for life safety, they're for building safety. Sprinklers don't save people, sprinklers save buildings. And this is the reasoning for this particular legislation is to allow for the buildings to not burn and be completely demolished, so that they get to be replaced with brand new non-rent controlled buildings. This is protecting politically sensitive rent controlled housing stock. And so that regulation is fraught with a bunch of different problems. One of them is that every time you are running something like a sprinkler head into every apartment in an apartment building like that, you are breaking through older walls that have things like lead and asbestos. And then the abatement process in that circumstance is extremely expensive, time consuming, and difficult. And then you're working inside people's homes during a pandemic. So this is going to be a long road. Whatever they come up with, there have been some negotiations done that might scale this back a little bit and have the requirement be that there only be sprinklers in the hallways outside each front door. But another important limitation that needs to be taken into account in this multifaceted city is that the water supply is extremely limited in terms of the water main's ability to provide the extra water and the pressure that's needed to provide sprinklers in this scale in large high-rise buildings. And so it may not even be feasible if this is legally required. The Public Utilities Commission may not even be able to deliver the amount of water that's necessary to feed these systems. So the team at the Apartment Association is working hard to work out the details and see if this is something that actually has legs. It doesn't necessarily affect any of us small fries, but it's an important requirement that's coming, and it's something that we're tracking on our level at the Apartment Association. There's also some discussion. The pandemic has affected our commercial tenants more dramatically than our residential tenants, and one of the side effects of that is that Recology and the Public Utilities Commission, when they don't get paid for water and garbage service by the tenants in a commercial space in a multi-unit building, when they don't get paid, they put a lien against the property. And now it's unfair that the landlords are having to pay these utility bills for tenants that don't pay any rent and won't pay their utilities because they can't be open. And so there's some conversations here about working with Recology. Recology's first proposal was, well, why don't we send a warning notice the first month that the bill is due, and then we'll send the notice to the landlord as well the second month it's due, and then we'll put the lien on the third month. Well, that doesn't give us a lot of time, and so we're working with them to try to figure out how to fix those issues with that. I think there's a possibility maybe we eliminate the ability for the utilities to put liens on the property. I mean, if PG&E can pursue people as consumer credit for an unpaid PG&E bill, that should be possible as well for a business. So we'll see what that looks like and how that comes about. But those are the issues that I'm tracking for everybody these days, and happy to open it up for any questions or comments. Okay. Well, it's good. Yes.
Comment.
Yeah.
Have you seen this? I saw recently a sign on a building that said this building has not gone through the seismic retrofit required, right. So it slapped a scarlet letter on the outside of the building.
Yes.
This just started?
No, it's been going on for a while. It has been the reality. Many of these. So the seismic retrofit ordinance, I think it's tier 4 buildings were supposed to be done this year or last year, and those are, I don't remember what the tiers are. I could look it up, but there was a category building that had to be done by this year. The vast majority of the buildings, the 5 units or more, 3 stories or more, wood frame construction, those buildings were due last September. And anybody who wasn't in compliance with the ordinance by September of 2019 started to get these notices. But the problem is that completing a seismic retrofit while all of your tenants are sheltering in place is a thorny thing to have to do.
Yeah.
And we've actually completed a couple of retrofits over the last year, and it's difficult. But we also have the Board of Supervisors pushing an ordinance that they call shelter in peace, which requires all landlords to stop doing construction work in their buildings while we're in the middle of the pandemic, which is, you know, I can see why they're doing it, but it makes absolutely no sense.
No.
You know, this is the squeeze that we get into with old buildings and the political necessity to keep these old buildings so that the voters are beholden to the Board of Supervisors, and we have to maintain these old buildings, and we don't get to increase the rent and pay the bills on these old buildings, and then all of a sudden we aren't allowed to do the maintenance work that needs to be done. And oh, okay, well, if you can't do the maintenance work and the building's in abatement, you can't do anything else, well, we'll just you can't charge any rent anymore. Like, oh man, like this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And how about,
Denise?
not only are we not charging rent, but let us take care of that building for you. We'll
That's right.
purchase it from you for, you know, put it in a
Right.
small site acquisition. And it's a
Let's-
whole scheme.
Let's ruin your market so that you'll sell to us at a discount.
Bingo. And then have all the nonprofits fight about who gets that building.
Right. Well, that's what the COPA legislation is
That's
about, and that's what the unit registration is about, regardless of the fact that it's not going to be possible because Costa-Hawkins is still on the books.
Oh,
and
but
would
San Francisco doesn't have to comply with Costa-Hawkins. They're
Right.
San Francisco.
That's right.
And then the other issue is when all those buildings that need to be maintained, then you get those NOVs on the property. You
Right.
can't maintain the property because you can't go in because of the shelter in peace.
Right.
May as well sell it to the government for 10 cents on the dollar.
Right.
Yeah, just get out.
Right. Well, I did have a conversation with a building inspector about a notice of violation on, not on my building, but not on any of our buildings, but on a neighboring building, where the notice of violation was something that was affecting our building. And the housing inspector basically said, yeah, we're not going out for anything but the biggest emergencies right now. They're issuing the notices of violation, but they're not going to take a look at anything anymore. They're working sheltering at home, which, you know, and it'll be interesting because, you know, we see in the conversations about the school board where everybody's trying to talk about what the return to work is going to look like. And the teachers union is saying, well, we won't go back until everybody's vaccinated. And the state's saying, well, the vaccinations aren't necessary if you're in the red or the orange tier or whatever it is. And everybody's arguing about when we go back to work. And, you know, realistically, we're all going to start hopefully seeing the effects of the vaccinations and the better weather, and summer might actually look, you know, remarkably more normal, except we're all still wearing masks and social distancing, but we can go places and we might be able to eat in restaurants and things. But when do people, you know, stop? How do we it's not stopping the momentum. How do we restart our momentum into going into regular life? You know, who's the first person who dips their toe back into the office? So, you know, it's pretty crazy.
I think it's fascinating that there's a lot of the private schools are back.
Right. My daughter's been back in school since October.
So that's the power of the union.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do they really want?
They want their vaccines and they want them now. They want power.
They want some more, maybe some more vacation time.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's hard to say that anybody's benefiting from what's going on, but you know, maybe the teachers like not being. I can't imagine any teacher really likes not being at school. You know, they all the teachers I know, including my mother, you know, would love being in the classroom, and they always look forward to going back to school. So,
well, good news is this morning they became on the list, the teachers.
yes,
Yeah.
I saw that. They're next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gavin set aside 10% of all vaccines for our teachers.
Yeah.
So they're
And I heard they do
my wife's
they
one of
do
them.
it-
She got vaccinated.
She's
yeah,
got her
they do it at
vaccine.
the school board
Good.
headquarters, something like that.
Well, and that makes sense if they can coordinate it through the school board headquarters, provide the vaccines there, and have the facility to do it. That's fine. Let them set up their own vaccine headquarters and get everybody vaccinated. But the first concept of, well, we're going to theoretically give the vaccines to everybody who, who is an essential worker and blah, blah, blah. Like, they don't have that information. They don't know who to contact to say that they're an essential worker, that it's time to get a vaccine. The only way to do it was with age. And that was a good way to get started. So I'm glad to hear so many people that I know are vaccinated. I definitely know more people who are vaccinated now than people who got sick. So that's good.
If you're over 65.
Well, I know a lot of people who are over 65, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's a good thing too. So Josh, did you have any comments or thoughts about what's going on in the market, or for homes or
Yeah.
apartment buildings?
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about single family today.
Okay.
If I could do a share screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to
Go
sign
ahead.
off. I've got another,
Okay.
I got to get ready for
Okay.
the meeting.
See you,
All right,
Bert.
see
Good
ya.
to see you.
Just a quick question. Denise, do you have
Yes.
anything to report to me?
Well, we'll do that separately, Bert. I
You can
asked
do it
for an
separately.
update
That's
last
fine.
week.
I just, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, do that. Just call me. Thanks.
Yep.
Can you see this here?
Yep.
So, yeah, I took a look at single family today, and the California Association of Realtors came out with some stats that I thought were interesting, compared to some statewide stats, and then compared to San Francisco. And so there's a couple of things jumped out at me. I'm not going to go too far into all of this, but what happened in California over the last year is, the housing market has really boomed. The statewide median is way up from the statewide median price is way up from 2020, looking at January year to date. And so overall sales in January in California were up 22.5% compared to January of 2020. So that's a huge jump in terms of overall sales. So I was thinking about that, and then I also saw some stats with San Francisco. So I'm going to talk about that big jump in sales in California compared to what was happening in San Francisco. The East Bay is doing really well, and you're starting to see these overbids happen now in the East Bay. We're seeing 10%, 12%, 15% overbids in the East Bay. Overbids in San Francisco are a lot softer. So you're seeing a lot of list price, sale price matching in San Francisco, but the East Bay is really, really hot. California as a whole is really hot. Their forecast for 2021 it's very optimistic. This kind of in the middle here. Existing single family home sales are expected to rise by more than 11% this year, and home prices are expected to increase by 8%. So that's good news that the market is going to continue to improve and do well. Interest rates are still outrageously low. They were 2.81% last week, a little bit up from 2.73%. So, homes are, it's still, there's still a lot of transactions happening. There's still a lot of opportunities. There's still a lot of people buying, and it's a great time to buy. Compared to, though, I looked at some stats. I was like, okay, well, what happened in San Francisco in January? And actually the numbers all kind of went down. And so I first saw these overall statewide stats, and then I looked at these San Francisco stats. And in San Francisco, the number of sales dropped by 16%. New listings dropped by 38%. Average days on market went up by 23%. And so it's something that just kind of caught my attention. And I'm wondering, to what degree is there some real softness in San Francisco, even in single family now? Is there really continues to be a push away from the city, where all the other kind of surrounding regions are doing really well and hot, and San Francisco's kind of soft? It's just something that caught my attention. It could be a 1 month blip, but it did give me a little bit of pause where I said, if listings are down and demand is the same, prices should go up. Didn't happen. Prices actually went down. So anyway, overall, very good news in California. A little bit of concern in San Francisco, but I was happy to see that, you know, the association is bullish on the overall market and the economy. I'm seeing definitely more from clients that I have, seeing more optimism, and people are starting to be like, should I bring my property out? What do you think? And especially in the 2 to 4 space, where it's like, is now the time? Because last year really wasn't the time. And so, you know, just like with these vaccines and improvements, you're seeing more people wanting to test the market. So that's a good thing. I don't know if the multi-unit market is back, is coming back in, you know, it's going to take a while. But it's nice to see that there's more optimism out there. So anyway, that was just kind of jumped out at me. You know, cap rates with multi-unit product right now can, you know, there's still some nice deals out there. There's, you know, I do see some better cap rates and some, you know, I'm not seeing screaming deals, but there's some trophy properties that are coming out in the low 4 cap rate, you know, zone, and which is super rare. Usually it's 3 or sub 3 caps. So there's some deals. There's nothing, you know, amazing that I'd say that's coming on the market, or that I'm seeing. But anyway, that's kind of
It
where
seems like the buildings that I see coming on the market are priced fairly competitively, but they have a lot of vacancies and they sit a very long time.
Right. Yes.
So, you know, I'm glad to hear that the problem is not only mine.
Right.
But you know, this is, I think demand long term. People are going to want to be in a place where there's stuff going on.
Yeah.
So there will be stuff going on at some point before the end of the year, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I was reading an article about this last night in the Atlantic, and was talking about, you know, well, summer's going to feel almost normal, and my thought was, for a second there, I was like, almost normal means I get to go back to a baseball game. Like, even if I'm wearing a mask, even if like there's nobody sitting in any of the seats around me for like 4 or 5 seats and I'm sort of all by myself, but there will be people there. And I have bought these tickets already. I mean, I'm not going to probably use them all because they're going to have to give me some refunds. They're probably not going to have all the, not be able to sell all the tickets for all the games, but I got a chill down my spine thinking about going back to the ballpark. Like, that may be what I missed the most, like a whole year with no baseball. So,
Yeah.
you know.
I recommend going up to like Sonoma to some of the wineries up there. I was up there over the weekend, and that was amazing. They've done a great job of social distancing and putting out picnic tables, and you're not inside doing wine tastings. They bring you a big flight, and there's all this space, and it felt normal and amazing and fun. So that was that late Sunday afternoon I was out there. So anyway, I recommend that if you're looking for a little normal enjoyment.
Yes.
There's not much to do.
No.
And that's one thing.
No, I was actually up there too last weekend, and
oh, cool.
It was nice. It was nice. The square in Sonoma is very nice these days.
Yeah.
So they've got enough room for a fair amount of social distanced outdoor dining. So anyway, well, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you, Josh. That was great. I appreciate your perspective as always, and thank you everybody for joining us. Good to see you, Antonio, Priscilla. Thank you, Denise, for joining us and participating. And we'll see you all later. Take care. Have a good rest of your week. Thank you. All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye, guys.